they want our voice involved in things, and they do respect what the UK has to say.
Right, and how devastating is it? Well, obviously there will be some accusations of sour grapes, but I think it's actually
sync term sheets between multiple investors. The problem of herding cats with investors. Yes, there's no good answer to that, but we'll see how we go. So thanks, Lucky, on that one.
Okay.
All right, valuing a business is definitely one of the things that I will talk about. So Georgina, nice to see you. I see a few familiar faces here. So, okay.
Right, well, welcome everybody to our How to Raise Capital workshop with SeedLegals, Anthony Rose, I'm privileged to have, and Dan from Forresters. I think he's there. Are you there, Dan?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, there you are.
Hi,
okay,
everyone.
great. I can only see one video at a time for some reason, but I'll work that one out in a minute. Well, what I suggest we do is I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let Anthony take over. The floor is yours, sir.
You know, should I go first? Dan, would you like to go first? How long would you like to chat for?
I'm just chatting for about 10 minutes or so, so I don't mind really. If you want to kick off, you've got all those questions there, so
all right,
happy for you to go for it.
All right, so I'll go first. So by the way, just on controlling Zoom, you can, there's a button at the top right to switch generally between grid view and speaker view. And you can also, if you have the chat window open and or the other, the video views, and I start screen sharing, you can also drag the slider out to the side to make the screen share bit or the speaker bit bigger. So you've got all the power. All right, so hi everyone. A poll has come up. All right, very exciting. So I'm Anthony. I'm a founder and CEO at SeedLegals, with the largest close of funding rounds in the UK. I'm not really here to pitch SeedLegals. I'm here to help you with all the things that you'd need to get investment ready and close your first round. And what I wanted to start with, I think they're going to do two parts of things I'll cover. Number one is the pitch deck and pitching. And number two is all the legals, valuing your company, giving shares to or options to employees and so on. So let me start with the pitch deck. I see a few questions have been about the pitch deck and what I call the art of the pitch. So with pitching, there are two parts. Number one is the deck itself. And number two is, these days, it used to be that you would meet with investors, but now everything's going to be on Zoom. So how do you do a great pitch on Zoom? So start with the pitch deck. Now, a great source of info on pitch decks is my pitch deck clinic. For those who haven't seen it, just do a Google search on SeedLegals pitch deck clinic. But I think a pitch deck is a story. So it's said that investors will spend about 3 minutes on a pitch deck and either be in or bail. And you've got 3 minutes to capture them. And I think the story is something like this. Number one, explain the problem space. And we're talking just about the deck, not the story that you can do when you present it. So the initial thing is, what's the problem you're looking to solve? Number two is, how are you solving it? Number three is, what's the size of the market? Number four is, what is your revenue growth prediction? What's your traction prediction? Number five is, what are you asking? Why? What do you want from me as the investor? And then the last slide is, contact us and so on. And the what are you asking for is important, because too often I see pitch decks that explain a nice problem and you're going, that was very nice. Why am I here? So your last slide or two is going to say, now raising 150K, offering SEIS, and the magic words, if applicable, have advance assurance. So in the UK, the vast majority of early stage funding is angel investors who are generally looking for SEIS and EIS. So when it comes to the deck, one of the things I often see is that companies spend a lot too much time essentially explaining how clever they are rather than how they're solving a problem. So when I look for a pitch deck, I always look to see, are you showing me, even though I'm an aspirant investor, I'm not looking for you to sell it to me as an investor. I'm looking for you to sell it to me as a consumer. Because if you show me why I would personally want it, then I think other people might want it. Therefore, you've got a business. Therefore, I want to invest. Whereas if it's just filled with talk of blockchain and stuff like that, at the end of it, you've no idea what it is. So the other tip from me is that I see often companies spending far too much time on their slide decks telling me what the Facebook's market size is. Like, dude, we know that. Don't patronize me. It doesn't matter if it's trillion. But companies spend too little time explaining what they are doing. So, you know, again, the critical part to hook the investor is explain the problem space. These people are doing X, you know, if only a Y existed. Number two, show your products. And here, if you can show it with screenshots, even if you have to mock them up, it's going to look like a real thing rather than the person guessing, I mean, does it exist? What is it? Okay, so that's broadly your pitch deck, maybe around 20 slides. I love to see slides being happy, vibrant, use lots of images. You can go to a site called unsplash.com, which has got free Creative Commons imagery, hugely gorgeous images. Don't use those icky Shutterstock stock images because they just go stock images. But try to get one theme per page. So if you're showing screenshots of your app, let it breathe. Don't squeeze 4 of them on one page. Have 3 or 4 pages, each with a nice full-size screenshot and maybe a picture of, you know, millennial using your app or whatever it is, if that's the audience. So enough on the pitch deck. So now it comes when you want to pitch to investors. And these days, a pitch is going to be on Zoom. So a couple of things: get your lighting right, get your camera at eye height, get a headset so the sound's good, make sure the lighting is good. Too often I see pitches which, you know, the founder's great, the idea is great, but you've just zoned out because you can't hear, it's really dim, you know, the camera setup, it's on the laptop pointing up their nose or whatever. So get the basics right, and it's worth it as an investment. So on mine, I've got a DSLR camera and a 4K capture card because I realized in like April last year, I'd be spending a lot of time on Zoom. So it's often going to be the difference between the person's zoned in and bought into your exciting presentation or zoned out. If you're presenting video as part of your pitch, you might be starting with a PowerPoint and then cut to a video. You'll need to master beforehand in Zoom how you can switch the sound source from the microphone to the video, because otherwise there'll be lots of messing around and nothing destroys your presentation about you changing the world like you can't get the sound going. Also, in your Zoom settings, if you open up Zoom and you've got the Zoom app installed, then you can go to advanced settings or video and make sure that HD video is enabled, and it'll give you just that little bit of extra edge. So I think that is the bit on the video Zoom. Make sure that if you are doing any presentation that's time limited, that you have this story arc in your mind that's going to beautifully finish on the time. And then when you're presenting to investors, the key thing is that although you might have done this 100 times, everyone's got to feel like it's the first. They've got to sense the passion. And when you're presenting verbally, start with the buy-in from why you had this idea. You know, so at SeedLegals, you know, after I left the BBC, I built a startup, I sold it. I built another startup, I sold it. I invested in a few, I got tired of paying lawyers. I met my co-founder, an ex-VC. We got together and we decided to change that. So there's like the background story, and now you've got people hooked as to what the problem is, shown in a personal way. So let me quickly now turn to a couple of questions that are coming in. So good accelerator programs, that's a very good point. There are many accelerators out there. Antler is a particularly good one. Entrepreneur First is one of the better known ones. There are many specialist ones. So Geovation is if you're anything to do with mapping data. There's some medtech ones. I don't know offhand, but if you drop me a note at anthony@seedlegals.com and tell me a bit more about your segment, I'll see if one of my team can point you in any optimal directions, or we can make an article for that. So how to achieve, okay, we'll get to some of the valuation ones later. And all right, so I think we've covered, I think the pitch. So now let me turn to the legals of getting investment ready. So here I'm going to turn on screen sharing, and you can probably make me a bit bigger by moving the slider across. So the 10 most important things for your next funding round. So we assume you've created your pitch deck, you're out there finding investors. Probably one of the first things to know is that in an early stage round, don't go to VCs because they'll tell you, we love what you're doing, come back later. So VCs generally come along once you've got some traction, some revenue. Prior to that, you're really going to be looking for angel investors. And broadly, you know, the goal of fundraising, I think, is something summed up like this, which is you're going out and you have an idea, and you can't raise investment just on a PowerPoint. So you have to build something yourself, because no one's going to invest just on a PowerPoint. Well, it's rare. You might be lucky. So our data shows that founders spend a median of £26,000 of their own money on the idea to do something, you know, prototype, research, maybe build an app, outsource, whatever it is, before they get their first external investment. And then, to me, it seems your goal is to do 3 funding rounds, each time valuing the company at 3 to 5 times the last round, such that after doing this 3 times, either you don't need to raise again, or you're ready for an exit and everyone makes a nice return. If you can raise 3 times, each time at 3 to 5 times the valuation, and each time diluting yourselves by about 15%, that means at the end of 3 funding rounds, the founders still have more than 50% equity, which is desirable. So once you see it in that mold, everything you do is all about fundraising to get to the next step. And then the standard pattern that I see in the UK is 26K of the founder's money goes into the business first. Then maybe your first round is 50K friends and family. Then you may raise 150 or 200K as an angel round, giving SEIS and EIS. Then you may raise 500 to 700K in a seed round with early stage VCs. And then you may raise a couple of million in a Series A round with larger VCs. Now that's sort of 4 things. You may skip 1 or more of them, but that more or less is the pattern. When I see companies who've just got a PowerPoint that want to jump straight to raising £1 million from a VC, you may have the gift of the gab. I've done that in previous startups, but more often than not, you know, VCs will go, I love what you're doing, come back later. And then you're back to raising a small round earlier. So with that in mind, let's now dive in. So thing number 1, get your cap table right. So the first thing that you're going to do after you've gotten together and had an idea is you're going to head over to Company House and incorporate your company. Sometimes I see founders making what I call, or what are called, alphabet shares. So you go, I'm going to have A ordinary and B ordinary and C ordinary, and these are going to have 2 votes and these are going to have no votes, and this one will get dividends. Almost every time I see that, when it comes to your first or second round, it all needs to get undone because it's just too complicated. Investors really dislike that. They love to see the founders have got ordinary shares. You generally start with 100 ordinary shares split between the founders, and then the investors will either get ordinary shares or preference shares when you get later on, and that is your standard pattern. And you'll probably start with 100 ordinary shares of £1 each or a penny each. And then you can do a share split, which you can do on SeedLegals before your first round, to turn that into 100,000 shares. So you can easily give investors, small percents as you have more investment. So thing one, it's kind of trivially easy at the first steps, but just make sure the cap table's right. The investors don't see that you've promised people shares but haven't yet given them, or that you've made mistakes like your paid up capital is £1 million. I've seen companies go, oh, we'd like the company to be worth £1 million, so we're going to issue £1 million worth of shares. But that's not what makes it worth £1 million. It means you have to write a check for £1 million to the company, which isn't working. So incorporate 100 shares of either a penny or a pound each. Next, you might, in the early days of your company, you generally cash poor and equity rich. So let's say you've got 2 founders, 50 shares each, and you now want to hire a CTO. And your CTO might have a market salary of maybe 80K or 70K a year, but you don't happen to have that money to pay them. So you might go, here's what I'll do. I will give you 5% or whatever percent equity instead of paying you for some period. And now we'll all work for free while we go and find our first investment. So how much equity should you give them? And should you give them shares or should you give them share options? So here's an important thing to know for tax purposes. So when you incorporate your company, the shares are worth nothing. There's no value. And you can happily give shares to people without tax issues. But once you have your first funding round, or you're about to have a funding round and you've got a term sheet out there, then the shares have a value, the company's got a value. And if you give shares to a person, that person has a tax liability. They got something for a value for free, and they have a tax liability on the difference. If the person you're giving the shares to is an employee of the company, then not only do they have a tax issue, but the company is deemed potentially to have it's a deemed payment, and the company now might be liable for PAYE and national insurance and pension, and it can be a huge problem. So the rule of thumb is, if the shares have a value, don't give shares, give share options and create an option pool instead. And we'll get to that in a minute. So when you get to your first employee, who's probably usually the CTO, you might give them shares because it's super early on. But later on, as you're reaching your funding round and post-funding round, you'll generally give options to your team members. So that then gets to, what size option pool should I create? So what is an option pool? An option pool is essentially, let's say you've got 100 shares and you'd like to just dish out some options, and you join it, great, here's 1% in options. Where do these come from? So whenever you give people equity, you're essentially diluting everyone else. And when you do your first funding round, your investors don't want to be diluted right after the round by you giving shares or options to team members. So they will usually ask you to create a pre-money option pool, which is creating it before the round. Now, it's actually, if you do your round on SeedLegals, it's all done in one go, but the effect is it has, as if you had created the shares beforehand, diluting the founders or the existing shareholders, and now you're free to give people options. And the question is, how large an option pool should you make? In the US, it's fashionable to make a 20% option pool, but that's the problem with making a big option pool, is you're diluting yourself, and by the third round, you regret if you've diluted yourself too much. So my data suggests a 10% option pool is the standard, and about half of companies will do it before their first round and a half not. So if you are planning to give share options to your team, the natural place to create your option pool is as part of your first round, and their 10% pre-money option pool is the go. So the next thing is SEIS. So as I said earlier, in the UK, the vast majority of early stage investment is angel investors who are generally looking for their SEIS and EIS. Now, advance assurance is where you write to HMRC and they write back saying, yep, we agree that you'll qualify for SEIS. And it's not legally required. You can just raise without advance assurance and do your SEIS compliance later. But investors will, for the most part, ask for advance assurance. And if you get your advance assurance, it's often the difference between, yep, I'll come back later, or fantastic, I'm in, where do I sign? So it's worth it doing the advance assurance, and you can do that on SeedLegals quickly and efficiently. And again, for those who don't, if there's anyone on the call who doesn't know about SEIS and EIS, just do some Googling on it. It's, you know, the investor gets a 50% tax deduction on the size of their investment. They pay no capital gains tax if they keep their shares for 3 years. And if your business tanks, they can write off their investment. So SEIS is great because it means you can also hit up friends and family. And if things don't work out, you know, you can still get invited over for Christmas again because at least they've written off their investment. It was okay. They've written it off both when they invested and the write-off if the business didn't work. So all is not lost. So SEIS is a huge advantage if you can offer it. So now coming to some of the questions in the chat, which is what is the company valuation? So there are a few ways of valuing your company. So firstly, why value your company at all? When you're raising investment, an investor is giving you some money and getting some percent of the company from that. And the percent they get is really a percent of the value of the company and their investment. That's the percent they're going to get. So if the company has very small value, they're going to get a very large percent. So ideally in your mind, you want the biggest valuation that you can have, but wait, that might not be a good idea. So how do you pick a value? Ultimately, the value is really just the thing you and your investors agree. But you have to come up with some number, and you have to be able to justify the number, because if you just made it up, then you know, the investor is going to make up their number and it's just going to collapse. So how do you value the company? And I think there are kind of like 4 ways to do it. Number one, you can read TechCrunch and then take a 0 off the end, because those are crazy American valuations. They bear no resemblance to UK ones. Number 2, you can go to your accountant, and your accountant will say, well, are you making revenue? You go, no. Are you losing money? You go, yes. Are you going to continue losing money? You go, oh, yes. And they're going to go, so why is your value greater than 0? So that's no good. Or number 3, you can read UK Tech News or sifted.eu or one of the many startup publications that keeps having these articles about so-and-so's raised this amount, which is always a bit depressing because everyone shows you how much they're raising. Of course, they've just picked the top of the iceberg, but the problem is they don't say what the valuation is, just how much they've raised. So that's not very useful. So my method is using data. And over hundreds of rounds on SeedLegals, what we've seen is that companies sell, give away in a sense, 15% equity is the median. So over here on the x-axis is the percent equity that you're selling in a funding round, and the y-axis is the percent of the time, and the peak is about 15%. So essentially this is saying that if you're selling or giving away 15% equity, your valuation is simply 5 times the amount that you're raising, so that the investor is getting 1 in 6 of the total, 16%. And this then means funding rounds typically fall into a few patterns. I'm raising 150K at an 850K pre-money valuation, so 5 times 150. Or I'm raising 500K at a 2.5 million pre-money valuation. Well, I'm raising $1 million at a 5 million valuation. So, of course, the 15% isn't a fixed number. There's a curve to it, but it's a good starting point. And it also means if you do 3 funding rounds, giving away 15% equity each time and creating a 10% option pool, at the end of that, the founders still have more than 50% equity. So the numbers kind of, it all works out. If an investor is asking for 30% equity, something is kakutsa. You don't want to do that because you're giving away way too much of your company. If I see on SeedLegals a company's raising and they're only giving away a couple of % equity, that generally jumps out as meaning one of two things. Either in a sense, they're leaving money on the table, they could have raised more at the same valuation, or they've picked a valuation that's just way too high, and that's problematic. So when you come up with a valuation, my starting point is, how much money do I need to get to the next step? And again, your goal is to raise enough to get you to the next step where you can raise more, and such that after a few times, you're good, you're ready to exit, or you're profitable. And so now your first set of money you're going to need is all about building the prototype and getting something, an MVP built to be able to get it live. And once you've got it live, your next set of requirements for money is going to be to get all the things you didn't get to build beforehand, to spend money on marketing, customer acquisition to get traction. And once you've got some traction, your next set is then to get to revenue and then to scaling. So each time you've got another step on that path and you want to fuel your team and your ability to deliver to get to that next step. And then that also means that that sort of standard pattern that I see in the UK, raise 50K from friends and family, raise 150 or 200 from angels, raise 500 to 700 from early stage VCs or funds and angels, and then raise a few million. And you can see it's sort of 5x each time, or 3x, and your valuation goes up accordingly each time. So now, somewhat facetiously, I then see that valuations kind of go in the following bands, which is a couple of founders have gotten together and have an idea, yeah, 300K valuation. You've built something, you've got a prototype built, it's actually live, okay, 500 to 700K valuation. Oh, you've got some users, you've got real people using it, $1 million valuation. Oh, you've got revenue, 2 million valuation. And once you've got revenue, then your rough rule of thumb is that your valuation might be something like 10x your annual revenue. So if you're doing 100K a month in revenue, 1.2 million a year, that might imply a valuation of something like 12 million, which is quite cool. If you're doing 10K a month in revenue, which many companies quite soon get to, some of it's initially, you've got an app or a site, but actually you're really working manually and you've got a first few partners or customers. 10K a month revenue, 120K a year. Okay, so you're about 1 and a bit million or so valuation just based on that. That figure of a 10x is arbitrary. I mean, it would be for a company that's growing maybe 2x or 3x year on year. If you're growing 5x year on year, your multiplier might be more like 15 or 20 times. If you're steady state, you're a cheese shop, you've been selling cheese since the late 60s, your sales are flat, it's great, the founders have a profitable business, but no one's going to be paying a multiple on the valuation. It's clear business will be the same next year, so maybe you'll find a multiplier there of more like 3. But for your standard growth startup, you may be looking at a 10x revenue as your multiplier. So that was all about doing funding rounds. And when we started SeedLegals, it was all about helping you do a funding round. But actually, I don't ever like to do what people tell me to do. And so my goal now is to, in a sense, help you not do a funding round. So what is a funding round? A funding round is raising enough money to last you 12 to 18 months to be able to do it all over again. And why 12 to 18 months? Historically, people have raised every 12 to 18 months. And it's because it's finding investors is slow. It takes you like 3 months. And then it takes you about 3 months to close a round. And then, of course, you want to raise at a higher amount later, which means you have to show traction. And that means it probably takes you 6 months to get to traction. And you can't risk trading insolvent, so you need 3 months' money in the bank. So put it all together, it's about 15 months. But it's really stressful. Initially, you've got lots of money in the bank. You go, this is amazing, we're cruising. And then slowly it goes down and you don't have revenue. And then you're eyeing running out of money and all the people you've hired, and life is difficult. So what if you could raise as you needed? And we call that agile fundraising. And agile fundraising really goes into 3 parts. Number one is before the funding round. What if you'd say, actually, I'm looking to raise 300K, but I have a couple of people coming to me going, hey, can I invest 20K? Love what you're doing. Instead of saying, I can't take your money, sorry, come back in April. What if you could go, yep, I'll take your 20K and I'll give you an agreement that says, you give me the money now and I will give you shares when I do my next round at a valuation to be agreed in the round. But because you're giving me money early, I'll give you a 10% or 20% discount for coming in early. And we'll agree the valuation later. And we call that a seed fast. That's our brand name. And it's technically an advanced subscription agreement. Money first, shares later. It's SEIS compatible, and they're insanely popular. And I think it's changed the way people are raising investment. In the US, it's called a SAFE and is very popular. We call it a seed fast. And it basically means that, you'd really love, you don't need 300K today. You really want 50K to start hiring some people and spend some on marketing. And that enables you to raise smaller amounts before the round. And then you might do a funding round. But instead of having to raise the dream amount to last, the next year or year and a half, what if you could close around faster and raise less, but then top up afterwards with what we call instant investment? So when you do a funding round, it creates lots of legals that say you can't issue more shares without investor consents and preemption and so on. What we do is we build in the provision to say you can top up a certain amount more by a certain time without asking for any additional consents. And it's time bounded, so it's suitably gamified. No one's going to diddle any other party. And you can even increase the valuation as you do that. And that means that you can do a round quickly, raising not everything that you wanted, and then go find investors on a weekly basis or monthly basis and essentially top up your round. And I love it on SeedLegals with our Slack integration. We're on a rainy Sunday. There are a few of these at the moment. People are raising 5K, 20K, 50K, 100K, for the cost starting at £100. And it's just transformed the way people can raise investment from this huge go big or go home to I'll spend some time on a weekend hitting up some people, and if I get a hit, I'll send them an instant investment. So that's all about that. Now, just to wrap up, a couple of do's and don'ts. So when you talk to investors, you're going to talk about valuation. And here, the valuation could be before the investment or it could be after the investment. Which of them is it? And if you don't say which it is, the investor might jump to a conclusion. And the valuation before you've added your investment is the pre-money valuation, and afterwards is the post-money valuation. When the investor invests, they end up, if you say you'll get 10% equity, it's going to be after the investment, they will have 10% of that total. So they'll have 10% of the post-money valuation. But when you talk to them about valuation, you can say, my valuation's 1 million pre-money, or 1.1 million post money. But it's important to say which it is, because if you don't say which it is, the investor might assume the other. So if they assume, if you say 1 mil valuation, and they assume you mean 1 million post money, that would mean your pre-money valuation is 900,000 if you're raising 100K. So always, and that would mean the investor would get more equity than you thought you were giving them. So always explain that it's pre-money. In my view, always talk about pre-money because it's clearer and easier to work out. And then the reason for always saying pre-money rather than just valuation is, one, it avoids ambiguity. Two, the investor knows you know what you're talking about, so they're not going to take advantage of you. And three, essentially by being open and transparent, the investor is going to trust you as well, and there's going to be no, mismatches afterwards. The next thing I suggest is make 2 versions of your pitch deck. So version 1 is the product proposition, the problem you're looking to solve, your market, the team, but not your revenue and your financial forecast. And you can give out that slide deck freely. I mean, I wouldn't post it on Twitter, but when people ask you for it, you can email it to them. And then version 2 is now with the business plan and so on, and the valuation and so on included. And the reason for having that as a separate one is that's more confidential. You might change it. You may have several different versions of the deck after talking to people. Maybe you start out with a 2 million valuation, or you show that your growth is at a certain rate and your feedback from investors go, dude, you'll never get to that, or hey, that's very nice for you, but it's not very aggressive. You need to be much more aggressive to be investable. So you don't want multiple versions of your slide deck floating around with different business plans, because investors might talk to each other, or maybe you've sent one to an investor and then later on they get another version which is quite different. So by freely sending out the first version without the financials, and then keep the other one for one-on-one Zoom calls, or only when an investor asks to see more detailed info and they might be on board, that way you're controlling things a bit better. And then the next one is, often I see founders will go, yeah, I'll give you, I'm raising, let's say you're investing 100K and my pre-money valuation is £1 million, so you'll get 10% equity. But that's wrong in 2 ways. Way number 1 is, if your pre-money valuation was £1 million and the investor's investing 100K, they wouldn't get 10%, they would get 9% or 9.09, because it's 100K out of £1.1 million. So that's the first mistake. The second mistake is that would only be the case if they were the only investor in the round. But if you're also raising from others, the amount that the valuation of the company after the round won't be 1.1 million, could be 1.2 or 1.3. So the investor might end up with 6 or 7% equity. So what you don't want to do is tell an investor, oh, you're going to have 10% equity, and then they discover it's less. So always, and that's why I suggest creating the round on SeedLegals, adding in, if you don't have all the other investors, at least add in dummy investors, you can even call them other investors, and then get rid of that or reduce the amount as they're replaced by real people. So you model the actual percent equity, because there's nothing to make people unhappy that they thought they were getting this percent and they're actually getting less percent later. So I won't go through all the deal terms. If anyone would like a slide deck, this deck afterwards, Neal can share it. Otherwise, you've got the video. Otherwise, you can drop me a note at anthony@seedlegals.com, and we can go through some of the things in more detail later. So now I'm keen to give Dan enough time, but can I have a few moments to go through some of the excellent questions now that I've turned off screen sharing, which I can see? Do you have a few moments, Neal?
Yes, please, Anthony. I think there's quite a few questions there, so if you'd like to cover those, we're all right for time and everything else, so please fire away.
So I've already covered, so starting with the 1206 one from Nate, you know, how to achieve American valuations with British investors, you probably can't. The Americans are crazy with valuations. That's because they have a different risk model that says, we'll throw unbounded amounts of money at you and then you'll own the world. Whereas British investors go, how much do you really need to get to, you know, being profitable? And because I think your market is probably smaller than you think it is. And so US investors, I think, are happy to sink huge amounts into the company because it will have a unicorn valuation. UK investors go, I don't want you to keep spending more and more money because it just dilutes me more. So I'd like you to show me a path to profitability, and I'll set up the valuation. And it irks me greatly. I see, you know, I've raised a certain amount and I look at US companies that are smaller than us, have raised like 10x the amount at a 10x evaluation, but that's life. So you know, if you're hunting in particular waters, in UK investors, you need to have sort of product market fit with your local investors. If you go to them with a $30 million valuation, they're just going to go, dude, come back later. So next one is, as a UK company, anything to be aware of with overseas investors? Great question. I think we see maybe 20% of funding rounds have got foreign investors, and it works great. You know, it's a UK company, it's UK law, it doesn't matter where the investor is. The only real thing to note is that UK investors have a certain pattern that they're familiar with. If they are serial angel investors, they know that generally, because of SEIS, they're going to get ordinary shares. They're not going to ask for preference shares with anti-dilution because it will disqualify their SEIS. Whereas foreign investors don't get SEIS and they don't know that. So you might find foreign investors asking for preference shares and so on. And now you're going to play the, you know, this isn't the way it works in the UK card to get them back to the set of probably more founder-friendly deal terms that you have in the UK, often thanks to SEIS, than they may be expecting in their area. But otherwise, there's no problem otherwise. And if you do your round on SeedLegals, we even let you include your IBAN and SWIFT details, so it's easy for foreign investors to send their money. So next one, I think I've covered pitch deck or business plan. Some people create one pitch deck and a separate business plan. I think if investors are looking for a like super complicated business plan, you can have a separate one. And they may ask you to send them your G sheet or something that shows how you've modeled everything. But generally, I prefer to have one document rather than two, but that's just stylistic for me. Next one, investor first or traction first? And that's a great question because that's the heart of the investing conundrum. And when you go to VCs, they go, typically, love what you're doing, come back later. And no matter how well you're doing or how big the company is, there's always the bigger fish that's going to go, that's awesome, we love you, come back later. So what I think, it's a bit like this. If you think of a graph of time and amount raised, there are two ways you can grow your business. One, you know, either self-fund or noodle around forever waiting to raise a huge amount. So it's a big step, raise 0.000 millions, or do lots of little steps or a few small steps to get there step by step. And when I see companies going, I'm looking to raise £1 million and they haven't shipped anything yet, I know they're going to come back 3 or 6 months later going, actually, I'm just going to raise 200K and get on with it. So I think things go much faster when you raise smaller amounts to get you to the next step rather than waiting for all the stars to align and find the magic investor who will invest at a big valuation, a huge chunk. But, you know, you can also A/B test. You can try both and see which works. Okay, so raise 100 ordinary shares. Welcome. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Does seed fast? Okay. So I didn't quite understand the seed fast question, but I think I have. Oh, our last one. Do I see any impact with Brexit? I don't know that any better than anyone else, but here's what my data is. The first bit was, what effect did COVID have? So just like anyone else on the call, you know, when COVID arrived, we went, what does this mean for our business? Does everyone stop fundraising? Is my business going to drop completely? And what I found was that funding rounds dipped for about a month or two, but then picked up again. And in fact, in December was a record month for us. And what I figured is that maybe startups fall into three categories, and whether it's COVID or Brexit or really anything else, the ones that can take advantage of the situation and are net positive, the ones that, you know, not sure if it's going to affect it one way or the other, and the ones that are definitely net negative. So when it came to COVID, obviously everything that was home delivery, work from home, video calling was going to be hugely net positive, and anything that was food, restaurant, gyms was going to be greatly affected. But what seemed to happen is that the founders who were either luckily in the right space to be net positive or could pivot their business to be net positive were then super aggressive at fundraising. Obviously, if you happen to be a medtech startup doing vaccines, you have no problem going out to investors. But that meant on the investor side, on day one, everyone went, we're going to procrastinate, we're going to wait for this to go away and get fixed. But very quickly, the smartest investors chasing the best deals realized those deals were going ahead anyway. So they couldn't stop playing. And so I think that's the reason things picked up very quickly afterwards. And we saw on SeedLegals, MedTech and EdTech had huge upticks in investment rounds. And obviously anything location-based was really going to be a downer. And I suspect somewhat the same with Brexit. I mean, no one really knows. And so far, the only thing that on SeedLegals is I've had to update our documents to where it says EU GDPR rules to say UK GDPR rules. Like, great. But otherwise, it doesn't seem to have greatly affected anything so far. But, you know, fundraising is all about investor confidence. And given that December was a record month, January started a bit slow, but seems to be back on the boil, I'm not seeing any great effect from that. And then I'll take one more question, which was, if you succeed in Innovate UK grant, how much should you shout about it in your messaging? And that's a great question. So here's my view on grants, which is, when I look at founders and I look at their pitches, the number one thing that I'm thinking about is, you know, are you running this like a military operation? Are you super focused on what is success for you and just doing the things that align with success and everything else is noise? So if I see a company going B2B and B2C and building a data warehouse and exploring other things, that they might think they're impressing the investor by doing that. But to me, it just means they're spending more of my money on other stuff, and they're much better off focusing on one thing. And likewise with finding investment. So it's great to get money from Innovate UK. It's non-dilutive, they just give you money. You don't have to dilute and give shares. But on the flip side, the hit rate with Innovate UK, it might be 10% of the time they're in. And it might take 6 months until they get back to you. And you might need to spend weeks on your application. So all of this means that you're kind of on hold. There's nothing wrong with applying to Innovate UK. And if you get that, that's fantastic. Where I think it's problematic is if people stop fundraising while they wait on an Innovate UK application, because time is money. You've got this idea, you know, other people might be developing it. So if you can keep going on your, you know, whatever's going to get you to your mission most reliably. And often university spinouts will focus on Innovate UK. Often your typical startup will ignore Innovate UK and just go to investors. But if you can mix and match, that's great. If you are lucky enough to have gotten Innovate UK, and then to answer your question, I think that is fantastic, and definitely mentioned in your slide deck because it indicates a validation, which is great. One minor thing to note, is that some government grant money counts as de minimis aid, and that is subtracted from the amount of SEIS that you can offer. So if you've got 50K from some types of grants, it means instead of having 150K SEIS you can offer, you now only have 100K. And you should definitely check that if you've got any grant money, because there's nothing that upsets investors that when they have invested SEIS, they then learn afterwards, sorry, actually you can't get SEIS. We can give you half SEIS and half EIS because I've already used up some of my SEIS. So that's it for me. If you've got any questions, anthony@seedlegals.com, or just go to the SeedLegals website, resources, data, and there are a lot of things I've spoken about where you can see data, or check out Pitch Deck Clinic, or just hit the chat bubble, and anything you need, we're here to help. Thank you. And now, Dan, thanks for being
Thanks very
so
much.
patient. Over to
That's
you.
great. Dan, I'd just like, well, everybody, thanks. Again, please just continue posting your questions in the chat and we can try and answer them at the end. Now I'd like to introduce Dan from Forresters, and I'll let him take the floor. Thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Okay, thanks Neil, thanks Anthony, really interesting. So I'm going to just share my screen. Oops. Sorry, everyone, just trying to. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides. Yeah, welcome everybody. My name's Dan Rusby-Gale. I'm from Forresters. I'm a patent attorney, and most of my work is in the field of electronic devices and software. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to get your IP investment ready. So I'll be looking at the various forms of IP. The three main ones are patents, registered trademarks, registered designs. But I should mention that there are other forms of IP that you will have, such as copyright, trade secrets, and various specific IP rights in plants and databases and that kind of thing. But I'll just be looking at the three main ones. So let's look at some case studies. Kicking off with registered trademarks. Now, you can register your company name, your product name, slogans, logos, graphics, colors, that kind of thing. And this is really important for protecting your brand. You can register your company name, for instance, and this will allow you to stop others from trading under your name and piggybacking off your brand. There you've got the registered trademark symbol and obviously the McDonald's logo. Really, really important for your brand. And if you're an early stage startup, you may be at the point when you're thinking about what to name your company or your products. And if you want to increase the chance of being able to register your name, then it's important to select a name which is distinctive, i.e. different, and importantly that it's not descriptive of the goods or services that you're performing. This will make it easier to register your trademark and protect your brand. The good thing about registered trademarks is that they can last indefinitely, provided you pay renewal fees every 10 years in most countries. So moving on to registered design protection. So you can register the appearance of the whole or part of a product. And the requirements here are that the design must be novel in the sense that it's not known already. And it must have individual character in the sense that the design creates a different overall impression as compared with designs that are known already. These are relatively low bars. It's relatively easy and relatively cheap to obtain registered design protection. As with trademarks, this registered design will give you the right to stop others from using your designs without your permission. So a a registered design can last for up to 25 years. That's the term of protection, provided you pay renewal fees every 5 years. And yeah, here are some examples of what you could register. It's pretty wide ranging: packaging, products themselves, sets of products, complex products, parts of products such as a part of a shoe here. You could also register logos, icons, typefaces, graphic designs, could be graphical user interfaces, parts of your website, that kind of thing. Moving on to patents. Now, a patent is a patent protects an invention, and it will protect a technical solution to a technical problem. And a patent is your deal with the government in return for getting 20 years monopoly for your invention. You have to disclose your invention to the world in your published patent application. So a patent will give you the right to stop others from using your invention, i.e. Making it, importing it, selling it, that kind of thing. We operate a first to file system, i.e. it's important to get an early filing date for your patent application. And that's the date from which your protection will run. So, and I should mention that it's also critical to file your patent application before you disclose the invention to the public. Once the invention's out there, you then cannot obtain valid protection, patent protection in Europe for the invention. So that's important. The requirements for getting a patent. So the invention must be novel in the sense that it's not known already, and it must be inventive in the sense that it's not an obvious combination of what's gone before. And also the invention mustn't be excluded from patentability. There's various exclusions, such as business methods, mathematical methods, medical treatments, and so on. But my job as a patent attorney would be to give you advice on your technology and how you can go about patenting it and how you can steer around these exclusions from patentability. So the process runs roughly like this. You will file your initial priority patent filing. This will get your filing date and will be your flag and your flag in the sand, if you like, from which protection will run. So we usually recommend filing a UK patent application first because it's relatively cheap compared with other countries, low official fees at the patent office. And you get a search report back pretty quickly from the patent office within 3 or 4 months. And the search report will give you a good indication about whether you're likely to get a patent and what the scope of that patent might be. Then, assuming the search report is okay and there's no highly relevant prior art, you may then want to go ahead with foreign patent protection in other countries. And this is where it can start getting expensive. But for startups, the usual approach that we recommend is to file an international patent application within 12 months of your UK filing date. And the international application, this is a really a vehicle for keeping the door open for filing patent applications in almost all countries around the world, and it keeps the door open for another 18 months. So, i.e., 30 months from your original UK filing date. And this is good for startups in that it gives you time to think about where you want protection. You need a patent in every country where you want protection, i.e. your key markets where you're manufacturing and so on. So so Europe, US, China, etc. And the extra time also gives you the time to raise money for these foreign filings, which, as I said, are quite expensive. Here's a real life example, rather an old looking iPhone there. There's many forms of IP. in this particular product. Obviously, Apple and iPhone are registered trademarks. The technical operation of the phone itself, the technology is protected by patents, many patents. Apple will hold some trade secrets which they keep for themselves. The appearance will be protected by registered designs, so the user interface and the phone itself, the shape of the phone, and the code, the software that runs on the phone will be protected by copyright. So what do your investors want to see? Firstly, are you likely to get sued by somebody else who already has IP protection in place for the technology that you're developing? One way to check this, you can carry out a freedom to operate search to look at what your competitors are doing, look at their IP portfolios, and make sure you're not going to be infringing someone else's IP. Secondly, have you protected what you're doing, and how have you gone about that? And it's important to have an IP strategy in place here to identify the IP in your offering, and to map out how you're going to go about the initial IP filings for patents, trademarks, and so on, and to get the important search reports to work out whether you're likely to get a patent and what the scope of that patent will be. Lastly, I should mention that there's the patent box scheme run by the government, and this is a great saving on your corporation tax when you eventually start having to pay that. The patent box will reduce your corporation tax from 20% down to 10% on all profits made from a patented invention, and this is worldwide profits made based on an invention patented in the UK. So it can be significant if you've got a worldwide market. So a bit of a sales pitch here. How can Forresters assist? So we offer a free 30-minute consultation. At the moment, I'm doing these by video. We can talk through your business, talk through your IP, and put together an IP strategy for you, and set out a roadmap for your various IP filings. And we can help you write your pitch documents if you like, give some input on the IP section. We can give fixed price quotes for the various filings, and we can do some competitor mapping to look at the patent landscape out there, work out whether you're going to be infringing anything, and also work out which areas you might want to focus on in order to improve your chances of getting a patent. Yeah, we've got a large team. I'm based in the London office, but we've got attorneys in all different technical fields, trademark attorneys as well, for protecting your brand. And I will just finish on, this is a bit of a success story here. We had a client come in to see us. He was a proper garden shed inventor. He'd literally been working in his garden shed and had come up with this invention for, it's quite a simple idea for marking a cross on a wall where you want to drill a hole. So you can, the idea is you hold up your kitchen cabinet onto the wall as a hole in the back. You can use this marker to spray a cross through the hole as you're holding the cabinet awkwardly up on the wall. So you can mark out the holes really quickly. This was apparently a big problem in the building trade. So yeah, the client came to us. We did a background search to look at what else was out there in this particular area. We identified some prior art, but off the back of that, it looked like it was possible to get a patent, and we drafted a patent application, filed in the UK, went down the international route as I was describing, and he ended up getting patents in all his key markets, Europe, US, also the Far East. We registered Marksman as a trademark for him, and we also assisted with his paperwork for Dragon's Den. He went on there, and yeah, all 5 dragons offered to invest. Yeah, off the back of that exposure, he yeah, he's now stocked in all DIY stores across the UK and is doing very well. So yeah, little success story on how your IP protection can help you grow your business. That's all I was going to say. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and have a look in the chat box. If anyone's got any questions, feel free
yeah, Dan,
to.
I think there's a few questions in there.
Yeah.
You might want to have a look at.
Okay.
For now.
So yeah, what I'll do is I'll drop my email in the chat box in a minute, and so feel free to drop me an email if you've got any questions, or if you want to follow up with a video meeting or anything like that. So so Lucky, what is the average patent cost, and can you patent a model? So yeah, the costs vary between different countries. For the UK, you're looking at around £3,500 plus VAT to draft and file a patent application, and total cost to get it through to grant, you're probably looking at another £4,000 on top of that. So yeah, 7,000 to 8,000 in the UK, and other costs for other countries, like I say. Can you patent a model? I'm presuming you're talking about a computer model here. The answer is possibly. If what you're doing is solving a technical problem using technical means, then yes. But if all you're doing is taking data, transforming the data and outputting data, then that doesn't give you the real world technical effect that you need to solve a technical problem. So it's very subjective, this, so I'd have to give you more specific advice on that front. So what's classed as disclosure now is if the patentable elements are black boxed, is it still undisclosed? Great question. So what we're talking about here is an enabling disclosure. So a disclosure that's not an enabling disclosure, i.e., as you call a black boxed, where somebody else can't work out what you're doing, then that is not what's known as an enabling disclosure, and that will not affect your chances of obtaining a patent. So yeah, you have to be disclosing the clever bit of what you're doing, i.e. the bit that's going to be the core of your patent. My advice here is to really disclose as little as possible. You really don't want to be giving away your secrets or risking giving away the clever bit. So yeah, hopefully that's answered those questions. The last one, have you come across or worked with the Bounce Back IP grant? I have not, but so no, I haven't come across that. I'll look it up, but yeah, sorry, I don't have any advice on that particular IP grant. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions. I'll pop my email in the box, so do drop me a line if you've got any more questions. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Neal, I think.
Dan, thanks very much indeed. Right, just to carry on, I'm going to introduce everybody to Daniel Ballin from Ideas Crucible. Now, Dan sits on our panel of advisory professionals on our Practice Your Pitch event, which I've put into the chat room. The next one, it's a free event, again, designed for startups to practice their pitch, ideally 3 minutes, to get an idea of what it's like to present on Zoom and get feedback from Anthony Rose, Dan Ballin, myself, my business partner runs private equity fund as well, and a couple of other panelists that we're adding. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Daniel. Hi, Dan.
Hi there, another Dan, popular name.
Another Dan.
Yeah, just say hi. And thanks to the previous speakers as well. I was involved in patents myself as a managed to file 24 of them, 24 inventions, about 14 patents, and they were enormously helpful. And I had the, I was one of in the lucky situation of actually, which probably shows my age, of actually selling one of my own patents as well. So it got as far as selling it to Sony. So, which is probably more of a great story but it's actually a lot of hard work. But I mean, patents are a great, and do catch the eyes of investors. But as Anthony says, make sure it's aligned to what you're doing. Don't get caught into, doing patents or doing grants or anything else. It's, it's a distraction from your own business. Because one of the key things at the end of the day is just to remember that you are there to, your goal is to create a business which is generating profitable revenue at the end of the day, and not to be, creating a patent or even raising investment, which is something we should, talk about. It can sometimes be a big distraction. So Ideas Crucible, it's making sure that you have everything in place to secure that capital though. And that is why we are the partners with the likes of SeedLegals. And we also partner with patent attorneys as well. We also have a team creating killer investment slides as well. So if you want a free consultation, just ping me an email on dan@ideascrucible.com, and lawyers to help you with everything, the whole journey from the beginning to the end of negotiating your term sheet. So as well as advising on your investment strategy. I've been helping startups, since 2001, and then that startup that I helped in 2001 I sold out to Collier Capital in about 2005. So good track record as well. And I want to be able to, and we can just say, if you've got any questions regarding investments, on where you are or your business, at the end of the day, you just remember, you focus on your business is my big piece of advice. We can help maybe put some nitrous oxide in that, and don't get too distracted any more than necessary with raising the investment. I think that's all I have to say, Neil, unless there's any questions.
Dan, thanks very much. Any questions in the chat, or that anybody would like to ask Dan? You want to
put my email in the inbox?
Yeah, if you can do. Right, that's great. Right, well, I'm just going to sort of recap everything of what we do. I'm the founder of Exponential Events. We've been holding capital raising events in the city when we were allowed to since 2017, and we hope to continue again soon, although I don't think that's going to be till probably later in this year, but we shall see. Now, we hold 3 major events each month. One is this one, which is your workshop, learn how to raise capital. We then hold a practice your pitch event, whereby you can come on, talk to people like myself, Anthony, present, again with Dan commenting and other people commenting on the pitch. It's designed to make you confident with Zoom, and also confident when you're pitching to potential investors. And thirdly, we hold an actual pitch event whereby companies are invited to pitch, obviously virtually at the moment, to a number of potential angels, professional high net worth individuals each month. And we normally have about 70 to 100 potential investors at these events. Now, during these times, we only charge companies for this event when they actually are physically pitching to potential investors, and we charge a nominal fee of £100, and we'll normally have 10 companies pitching, ideally 3 minutes plus a few questions. What I'd add to Anthony's point earlier, which I think is interesting, and with pitch decks, you should definitely have 2 pitch decks, short deck and a longer deck. Again, longer decks reserved for sending out to people who've shown interest and such like. I'd also add that you should have a 1 or maybe 2 pager. And what I'd encourage founders to do is to take their short deck, which could be 10 slides or so, maybe more, and put the main points down into a 1, most 2 pager that can be covered in that 3-minute pitch. Because pitching is a different the baby to actually sending out pitch decks. you've got to excite, you've got to have a knockout punch, and you've got to leave investors thinking, right, I want some more information on that, rather than try over a 3-minute or 5-minute pitch to try and explain everything that's in your pitch deck. And those are the flyers. Don't even need necessary when you're sending them out, and to reach out to potential investors through social media, LinkedIn and such like, that you can send out to potential investors, friends and family, people for comments, and you get your feedback on that. As I say, then comes the pitch, which is linked to that, 3 minutes long. One of the great problems we find through the practice of pitch events is people put up their pitch deck and read it out. Well, that's not what a pitch is about. Pitch is about, as I say, exciting the interest, not saying too much, with a view of hooking an investor on board. Then you take them to the next stage. So I'd encourage everybody to see our website, which is exponentialevents-.com. On there, under virtual events, is all our events. As I say, it's free to register for the workshops, and it's also free to register for the practice your pitch. And again, it's just a way of helping startups get more professional, to get in front of the right people, and to get their investment. So that's all I really have to say at the moment. Has anybody got any questions for me? Fear not. Okay. This has been recorded. Everybody who's attended will get a link to, I'll put it up on our YouTube account later today or early in the morning. But again, thanks very much for everybody. As I say, we're here to help, especially during these tough times. People are investing. The one advantage I finished with the virtual world now, and everybody's accepted that this is the only way to go at the moment, is that it opens up the whole world. We could have investors in our events now from Dubai, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from Europe, from the States, who never could have attended our event in the city, but are quite happy now to listen to pitches from potential and exciting startups going forward. Where can you rehearse? Yeah. Sorry, Mike, the website, if you just go to www.exponential-events.com, you'll see all the information on there. I don't know if Anthony's still there. Cost of setting up SEIS with SeedLegals.
I think all their pricing is transparently on their website, actually.
Yeah, I believe it is.
That's the last.
I think Anthony's gone. I think from memory, it's
right in the middle of the website. Pricing. There you go.
How much is it?
Scale. Start £29 a month. Scale £69 a month plus that. Let me add in the link, save you reading it out loud. Gives a breakdown.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Any other questions before we let you get on with your afternoon and back to work? No. Okay. Okay. There we go. Somebody's posted that back on as well. That's great. All right, everybody. Well, again, Dan from Forresters, thanks very much indeed. Dan from Ideas Crucible, thank you very much.
You want to find angels? Someone's asking.
Oh,
drop me an email. Or drop me Neal an email. Drop us both an email.
I'll cover that one just quickly. Finding angels, yeah, the $1 million question. I'd say a bit like housing, location is pitch. There's plenty of, not just us, and there's plenty of pitch events out there to potential investors. Make the most of it. Get on as many as you can. Just keep getting the word out there. Perfect your pitch first, so you're not wasting your time, which, as I say, we can help you with at our pitch events. But personally, I would contact people who you've got perhaps on LinkedIn. Also search for potential. With LinkedIn, for example, you can go and search Angel Investor London, and it will give you potential contacts, which you can then, send them a message to say, look, we're launching this. Would you be interested in receiving more information? and slowly catches the monkey. Again, people you already know on perhaps your Facebooks, your LinkedIn, your Twitters, whatever it might be, ask them or send them information, ask your friends, your family and such like to, again, promote.
Just beat me to it, actually, Neil. I was just going to say, friends, family and fools is normally the expression.
Yeah.
Angels will take you more seriously if you've put your hand in your pocket yourself, or you've managed to get someone, friend or family, or to put it as well, because I sense there's a lot of very early stage pre-seed startups here, and they will, appreciate it if there's some skin in the game from you guys as well first, before you then go to some of the angels, because angels are surprisingly risk averse. And so, yeah.
That's right. I mean, the good news there, Dan and Jules, or sorry, who, is that once you get one, you'll get another. And I know that sounds crazy.
Like lemmings.
But if I've invested in Dan's company and I'm keen on it, I'm going to talk to my friends who I know have also got money and say to them, I've just invested in Dan's company XYZ. I think it's great. You should have a look. Yeah. And it is like lemmings, and you will roll in investors after investors once you get into that scenario. But it's that initial hard work of getting the word out there. Hope that helps. Okay. Right, we're coming up towards the end now. So again, thanks everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at our next events as we go forward. Take care.
Best of
Thanks,
luck.
Dan. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks
See you
very
soon.
much. Bye.
Cheers all.